Hey everyone, it's Kristen. So this is part 2 of Avengers 267, where we're talking about Kang. And obviously, when I was talking about, the Storm and Colossus joining the Avengers, obviously that didn't really happen in like our reality, which it would have been cool though. But of course, Storm did join the Avengers later, when she was married to Black Panther. But Colossus never did. And of course, Beast has been a member of the Avengers for a number of years. But it would have been cool, if Colossus had joined too, but that's okay. So when we last left off, we were in the sub-basement tunnels of the Avengers Mansion. Wasp, was kind of going to Hercules and Black Knight to see their progress. And I said I would just briefly fill you in on the origin of those two. Hercules, pretty self-explanatory. Immortus brought him from the past in order to battle Thor, which is a pretty frequent theme for Hercules. He's constantly battling Thor through, because he's been mind controlled, manipulated or whatever. But that's a pretty constant theme for Hercules. Greek god, Greek demigod, super strength, all that sort of stuff. And he's also, in this Marvel comic version, he's pretty arrogant, full of himself, he's pretty pampered. He considers himself a big deal. He considers himself a movie star. Yeah, so, I think he was like 64 when he was first introduced. 64, 65 into the Marvel Universe, somewhere in there. And then Black Knight, he, I think, was 1967, and he's actually the third Black Knight. His ancestor during Camelot was a knight of King Arthur's court, or in Camelot, not exactly, not Knight of the Round Table necessarily, but and Merlin gave him the ebony blade, and he, endued it with certain powers and abilities, but it also comes with a curse. Like, the more blood it spills, the closer the person that has it is to be driven mad. So that's great. But if you have a sword, that doesn't mean you have to use it to, kill people, as you will see later on in this issue. There are creative ways to use it. He also has a winged horse, which is really cool. I've always wanted a winged horse, a Pegasus. That'd be awesome. Since I, can't fly myself, but of course, humans having powers and being able to fly like under their own power, and winged horses, they both don't exist. Anyway, whatever. So he's the third one, and his uncle was the second one. He took up, the mantle and used the ebony blade, but he was actually a villain. And basically, on his deathbed, he confessed his crimes to his nephew and gave him, the ebony blade and everything else that he used to be Black Knight, and said, I want you to use this to restore our family name. I want you to, atone for my sins, basically. And so that's where we are with him, the third Black Knight. So there's this strange glowing that surrounds them. And they're like, what's going on? And Hercules is like, Dane Whitman, that's Black Knight's name. Is your machine supposed to do that? And he's like, no. And so they come into this fog area, and they don't know what's going on, but all of a sudden they see the Hulk, and Janet shouts, oh no, it's the Hulk. So obviously this must be where he's a rampaging monster Hulk, and not like a member of the Avengers Hulk, because otherwise they wouldn't be like, oh no, it's the Hulk. And Hercules is, like, stand back, you Avengers, I'll take care of this. So obviously, if he was friendly. If he was a member of the Avengers, they would not be reacting this way. So at this point, that's who he is. So Hercules hits him really hard. He falls, and he does not get back up. And that's why Janet is like, I don't think this is Hercules. I don't think this is the Hulk. Because even though Hercules, yes, you can punch really hard, granted, but he wouldn't have stayed down after that. There's just no way. So, and then all of a sudden he transforms before their eyes into Giant Man, which is actually the cover or the alias that her husband, ex-husband at this point, Hank Pym, first used in the Avengers. And she pulls the mask off and says, "Yeah, that's definitely him." So I don't understand what's going on. And then we go to New York Harbor and we see Captain Marvel, yes, Captain Marvel, and Captain America and the Submariner. They're in the harbor making sure that the hydro base, is working, that like their ship will just, be able to dock right up to it. So, yes, Captain Marvel in the movies is not the first Captain Marvel. She's actually the fourth Captain Marvel, because the original Captain Marvel was a Kree warrior named Captain Marvel, and everyone just called him Marvel because they weren't getting the nuance of his name. And he actually died of cancer in the comic books in 1982, and it actually stuck. Like, he stayed dead, which is surprising because, I mean, they bring him out every once in a while, but he's not like real. He's not really there. But it's surprising because, in comic books, I've said this before, soap opera, nobody stays dead, pretty much. Everyone's still is alive. Or they come back to life, or no, they were never really dead. They were just in a suspended animation, or, whatever. Anyway, so Monica Rambeau is Captain Marvel at this point. What happened is she got hit by like an energy dispersal field that was from an energy weapon. It has like imbued her with like cosmic energy. She got her powers by being bombarded like by extra dimensional energy caused by this energy dispersal weapon or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But anyway, so she can control and manipulate energy, turn into like energy, become intangible, fly at supersonic speed. So she didn't actually call herself that. The press, in the comic books, called her that, and so she just went with it. Because like Thing said to her at one point, hey, I knew Captain, he'd be okay with you taking his name, and Thing's like, I'm not the only Thing out there. So she was also in, the Captain Marvel movie, not as a superhero, and then she was in WandaVision, and she got her powers, which I'm thinking that they're going to call her Photon, because that was one of her names in the comic books. She's also been like Pulsar and Spectre towards Photon, but we'll see. I don't know. But yeah, she was in a WandaVision too. And so anyway, and the third Captain Marvel was actually Captain Marvel's son, but he didn't last very long. They killed him off in like 2002, 2006, somewhere in there. He only lasted like 10 years, I think, in the comic books. And then the current Captain, who was originally Miss Marvel, she actually didn't get the mantle of Captain Marvel until like 2012. I think it was 2012, because Marvel Comics finally said, well, okay, we'll let you use the Captain Marvel name for her. And that's why, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, is Miss Marvel now, because Miss Marvel, the original one, moved to Captain Marvel, and in homage to her favorite hero, Ms. Marvel, took the name Ms. Marvel. And, you know, Carol Danvers, I mostly associate her with Ms. Marvel because of her connection to Rogue, which I still need to do that comic book, Avengers Annual 10. Ms. Marvel, you know, got her power stolen by Rogue. But it just, there's so many there's so many comic books and stories that I want to do that I just forget to do them and then think, oh, well, I should do Kang, since people might not know who he is, or oh, like coming up next will be like a Valentine's Day series, since it's going to be Valentine's Day soon. But anyway, so there's just too many stories to do, and I get distracted, and then I forget, and then yeah, stuff happens. So anyway, so they're on the boat, the ship, talking about Namor, the Submariner, like that she doesn't think he should be a member of the Avengers, so to speak, because he's arrogant, and he makes her nervous. Like he's selfish. He acts selfishly. And Captain America said, well, I've known him ever since the war, and he's had a hard life. And I think, yes, he can be hot-tempered and, difficult at times, but I think the Avengers will be good for him. I think that they'll bring out the best in him. So anyway, and she says, well, Captain America, he's like, call me Steve. And she's like, okay, you can call me, Monica Rambeau. And he's like, wow, you didn't have to tell me your real name. And she's like, well, I've been looking for one of the Avengers to trust and confide in. And I think you're that person. I mean, if you can't trust Captain America, who can you trust? I mean, honestly. And then Namor leaps out of the water and says, look, I brought dinner. Lobsters. And Captain America's like, oh, not lobster again. And Monica's like, don't listen to Mr. Meat and Potatoes over here. As far as I'm concerned, we can have lobster for dinner every night. Which, I mean, I agree, lobster is awesome. I just, of course it's pretty expensive, so it's not like I have it a lot. I've had it maybe a handful of times, but it's really good. I really liked it. So anyway, back in the fog, the void, Giant Man changes to Iron Man in his original armor form. And that sparks something in Janet's memory. She's like, holy cow, I know where we are now. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, when we first started the Avengers, when we first formed, and this is back in Avengers 2, we fought this villain who called himself, or this entity that called himself the Space Phantom. And what he would do is he could copy the appearance and powers of any one person. But when he was in their form, they would be sent to this place, of limbo. They couldn't occupy the same space. He was a shapeshifter. He basically took their place, and the person he was impersonating took his. She's like, that's where we are. We're in limbo. I recognize, because when we fought him, he first, and then Iron Man. So we have to be in limbo. And Caped Kang, because a really earlier video, he appears and says, wow, well done. You came to that conclusion by yourself. I didn't even have to tell you. And Hercules is like, well, wait, what's going on? I thought this realm was ruled by Immortus. And he's like, no, Immortus is no more. I'm in charge now. I'm the ruler of Limbo. And Janet's like, well, why'd you bring us here? And he's like, well, for my own amusement, of course. I mean, and, if you defeat me, then yeah, you can go home, but you have to defeat me first. Otherwise, you'll just stay in limbo for eternity. And she's like, okay, fine. And so she, aims her bioelectric sting at him. And he's like, ha, that has no effect on me. But then that gives the Black Knight a chance to use his sword on Kang's force field, which brings his force field down. Because, like I said earlier, when, I told you that there's a curse attached to the sword, that the more blood that's spilled by the sword, then the closer the wielder of it is driven to madness. So I said there's other creative ways to use the sword, and this is one because, of course, it was enchanted by Merlin and has a lot of magical properties, including like disrupting almost anything, like, including force fields. So anyway, and then Hercules comes in and delivers the final blow, so to speak. And wouldn't you know, it's a robot. And he's like, is that all you have? Is that all you've got? Have you forgotten that I'm also the master of robotics? If you can't do better than that, you'll never leave here. You'll never go back home. So he just crushes the head. And Ravana, she's like, I don't understand what's going on, basically is what she said. And he's like, this is going better than I hoped. I have these Avengers right where I want them. She's like, I don't understand. And he's like, of course you don't, because your intellect is far below mine. That's basically what he says. These villains, they think they're all that. Like Dr. Doom, he definitely thinks very highly of himself, and so is Kang. I mean, why else would you name yourself Kang the Conqueror? Anyway, so basically his plan is that since he's managed to eliminate all of his divergent duplicates except one, the oldest Kang that's the ruler of the 41st century, what he plans to do is lure the duplicate Kang to Limbo to fight the Avengers. And Ravana's like, well, can the Avengers defeat him? And he's like, of course they can't. But they'll weaken him enough where I can deliver the final blow. And then, since he'll be, dead, I'll replace him with a robotic copy, to rule, so I can rule by proxy in the 41st century, as I have done so many times. So basically, a lot of the kings that were ruling different time periods or different places, whatever, he would get rid of them and then replace them with a robot that, he controls. So it's kind of like he's already ruling that place. So, and then he says, and then with the Avengers halved and his self-established as the ultimate Kang, he shall conquer all times. Okay, so what happens in the next 2 issues, I'm just going to sum up because, like I said, I wanted to do that issue because of the first little part, even though it was a small part that related to X-Men in history, because you know how I feel about both of those things. So what happens in the very beginning, or in the next 2 issues, is that a Captain America, Captain Marvel, and Namor suspect that something has happened to their teammates, and they think Kang is responsible. So in the meantime, the Kang sends the Dire Race, which are in Limbo. They're like kind of like an alien race. They have like dark magic powers, and they can shapeshift, and they can like poison you. And they are actually kind of a offshoot of their parent race, the Skrulls. That's the best way I can think to describe it. So he sends them to Limbo, or gets them to attack the Avengers. They fight their way through to the home of the base of the Divergent Kang, who's still alive at this point. And then what happens is the other Avengers use the leader's time machine in order to go to Limbo, to help their friends. But what happens is the Caped Kang shows up and he captures everybody. And so then the Avengers get free and fight the Caped Kang. But what happens in the process is, unfortunately, the Divergent Kang gets killed. So Kang definitely is, the only Kang, he thinks. So Immortus, remember Hercules mentioned him before as being the ruler of Limbo. He comes and he tells Kang, "Hey, look, I'm you from the future. Like, I'm actually you." And Kang, he can't understand it. He, even though he knows all about time travel and has seen all this time travel, he's like, "I don't understand." And basically, Immortus also has a device that holds like all the knowledge of all the Kangs, and that's how he knows like all this stuff and about everything that's going on. Because what had happened with him is that he was approached by the timekeepers. They're like alien beings who try to keep like the timeline straight and keep everything in order. He was approached by them, basically back like before. Like I said, time travel is messy. So he was approached like during like probably, I can't remember exactly when in the timeline, but he was approached by them and they said, "Hey, if you'll join us, help us keep the timeline stable, we will give you immortality in exchange." And he, being weary of, he had just lost his son apparently, and his, Ravana, he's like, "Sure, let's do it." So basically, he became, their helper, their servant, so to speak. And he cleans up the timeline, or helps them clean up the timeline. So basically, Kate Kang, with all this knowledge of all the Kangs, because he was trying to get this device away from Immortus, it backfired on him, and he was just flooded with all this knowledge and the fact that this is his future self standing before him, telling him, "Hey, this is what's going on." He basically loses his mind, and he retreats back into the into limbo, because he's like, "I can't handle this. This is too much." And Immortus actually sends the Avengers back to their own time, but not. Okay, this does not make him a good guy, because he spends a whole lot of his time manipulating other people and manipulating events to try to get more control. Because that's in his nature. All the Kangs pretty much everywhere want to conquer, the world. And this is pretty much what Immortus wants to do. And it's so funny because I back in the day, during the X-Men animated series, Beyond Good and Evil, I think it was season 4, 5, probably 4, I think. But part 4 of that, you see at the very end is Immortus, and at the time, of course, just getting into superheroes, and I was just getting into superheroes when I watched that show, because that show basically sparked my love of superheroes. I had no idea who that guy was, and I thought, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And he, because Apocalypse was trying to rewrite time, and so at the end you see this guy clean up the timelines, and you're like, "Oh, wow, that guy's really cool, and he's really powerful." That's Immortus. So yeah, I of course didn't know that at the time, but there you go. Kang was in X-Men, the animated series too. So anyway, like I said, I wanted to do that issue mostly because it is Kang. People have questions about him. Obviously, I don't have all the answers, and Kang, time traveler, any time traveler, super complicated because there's all these things that come with time travel. Anyway, so I hope I helped you understand a little bit about what happened and who Kang is and what's going on. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will, do my best to answer them. I'm sure there were at times when I was not very clear because I was just all over the place. And like I said, a little out of practice because it's been a while since I've made a video. The holidays and being sick and all. So anyway, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. Or if you have just any other comments, feel free to share them. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you join me, for my next series, which it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be about Valentine's Day and couples, mostly DC couples. You'll see why if you join in for the first video in that series. So, and I hope you do. I hope you do join me for the next video, and I hope you subscribe, and so you can get notifications of all my videos. And if you want to, I have lots. I have I think 90 other superhero videos. If you want to check those out too, I'm trying to be better about posting them consistently. So anyway, I hope you join me for my next series, and until next time, bye.